Today we're going to talk about Yoga Nidra, just to give you a brief introduction of what it is. It's a meditative-like practice. It's also called Yogic sleep, and it works on balancing the 5 unifying bodies or layers of the body. These layers are called sometimes sheaths, and they include a physical layer, an energetic layer, a mental and emotional layer, a high intelligence layer, and a bliss layer. So each of these bodies is distinct, and yet they are all part of the other. And during Yoga Nidra, our practice takes us through each of these bodies, allowing the body and the mind to totally and absolutely relax completely. So Yoga Nidra is unlike meditation in that it gives you a chance to have absolute release both physically and mentally. It also works on emptying the mind as opposed to focusing on a particular subject or a particular mantra during the practice. So before we begin Yoga Nidra, we start with a sankalpa. And a sankalpa is an intention or a resolve that's something very personal to you. It's something very positive you want to do, maybe a change that you want to make to your life, and maybe something you want to become. And what we do is we focus on this intention before we begin, and then throughout the practice it enables the mind to come back to that intention and to start dealing with that intention subconsciously, so you can look at working on achieving that intention without actually physically going through any mental stress thinking about it, which is the kind of thing you would do if you were awake. So before we begin the Yoga Nidra, we start with a rotation of consciousness. Now the rotation of consciousness takes us through the first of the 5 bodies, which is the physical layer. The physical layer is called the Annamaya Kosha. This includes things like the muscles, the bones, tendons, ligaments, everything within the body, everything you can see, everything you can feel, all the physicality. So that gives us a sense of grounding and a sense of being. And then one by one, we start to move through withdrawing ourselves from the physicality, moving on to the other layers of the body. So after focusing on the Annamaya Kosha, we then move to focusing on the breath. And with the breath, we focus on the Pranamaya Kosha, or the energy body. This layer can be perceived, but it is distinctly different from the Annamaya Kosha. Within yogic philosophy, our prana, or energy, moves through the inner channels of what we have within our body, the nadis, or the energy lines. You could connect it to energy lines. For example, you could compare it to Chinese medicine and the energy lines they would use for acupuncture. So the prana, or the energy, travels with the breath through the body. Although we refer to prana as breath a lot of the time, it is not the actual breath itself. It's something more subtle than the breath that passes along with the breath throughout the body. So we go through the Pranamaya Kosha, and we then focus on the 3rd layer, the mental and emotional layer, called the Manomaya Kosha. So during the Manomaya Kosha, we look at our emotions. So we could relate this layer to, for example, to when we get carried away with anger or fear, or we're completely starstruck, or any of those raw feelings or emotional feelings that we have. It's an instinctive state of the mind. It can be both voluntary and it can be involuntary. We may, for example, try to deal with emotions by suppressing them, but during Yoga Nidra, we can experience those emotions without actually being governed by them. We then look at the 4th layer, which is the layer that takes us to higher intelligence, or the Vijnanamaya Kosha. That could be explained by something that is unexpectedly insightful comes out of your mouth. So you say something or you do something, you have a gut instinct That's something very unusual, but something very positive that you come out with. This kosha is experienced during a visualization stage of the practice, when we observe ourselves listening, watching, walking and feeling. And then finally we have the rest, where we lie completely rested, both physically and mentally. The Anandamaya kosha, or the bliss layer, is described as total absorption in a blissful state. It is the subtlest of the 5 koshas, where there is only a sliver between the ego and where there is no ego. So it is a connection to the divine, a connection to the transcendental. In Yoga Nidra, this layer is present in all of the other states, and also in the brief silence before we come out of the deep physical and mental relaxation. So obviously the benefits are complete stress relief for the body. It helps with healing of the body. It gives you time to be totally taken away from the realities of the world. It gives you time to be yourself. It gives you time to focus on yourself. And it can give you a sense of total liberation, total relaxation. It can make you feel energized. It can make you feel completely de-stressed. It's a very positive thing. It can be done anywhere, and you don't have to do it lying down, although lying down is the usual position for Yoga Nidra. I, for example, will do it sometimes on the train on the way home from work. So it can be done seated, it can be done by any age of person, and it's something that you do again and again, and the more times you do it, the more prepared your body is to go through the different stages of Yoga Nidra. You'll fall in and out of consciousness. You'll be reminded not to go to sleep. However, you will fall asleep. You'll remember some parts, you won't remember the other parts. And then another time you do the practice, you may have a different sort of experience. So anyway, we'll get on to doing a session of Yoga Nidra in a moment. But for now, that's the introduction. So have a good day. Speak to you soon. Bye.